Picture two minds standing in the same room, watching the same moment unfold. Nothing dramatic happens on the surface. A few words are spoken, a few glances exchanged. Silence fills the gaps. One mind feels the truth instantly. The other dissects it piece by piece. This is the quiet clash between INFJ and INTP. Intuition versus analysis. Pattern recognition versus logical deconstruction. Both are searching for truth, but they take completely different paths to reach it. And the unsettling question is this: who actually sees it first? INFJs don't wait for evidence to stack up. Their intuition scans emotional undercurrents, motives, inconsistencies, and future consequences in a single internal movement. It's fast, silent, and often impossible to explain. By the time others are still debating what something meant, the INFJ already knows what it will become. Their truth arrives whole, like a completed picture dropped into the mind without instructions. INTPs, on the other hand, don't trust what arrives too easily. They slow time down. They break reality into components: words, logic, cause and effect, internal contradictions. While INFJs leap to meaning, INTPs rebuild meaning from the ground up. Their strength isn't speed, it's precision. They may arrive later, but when they do, their conclusions are structurally sound and brutally accurate. So who sees the truth first? The one who senses it, or the one who proves it? Watch closely, because by the end of this video, you'll realize something most people miss. Truth isn't just about arrival time. It's about how much of it survives the journey. If you want to understand how these two minds really work and why both are dangerous in completely different ways, stay until the end. And when it clicks, drop the word truth in the comments so I know you saw what others didn't. Subscribe, because this is just the beginning. INFJs recognize the truth as a complete pattern instantly, while INTPs need to reconstruct it step by step through analysis. INFJs don't arrive at truth by collecting pieces one at a time. They receive it as a whole, like a sudden image snapping into focus, before they can explain why it makes sense. INTPs, by contrast, move carefully through logic, testing each fragment, checking consistency, and rebuilding the structure until the conclusion is undeniable. The difference is not intelligence, but orientation. The INFJ mind scans for meaning beneath events, emotions, contradictions, and silences, compressing them into a single internal knowing that feels immediate and complete. The INTP mind dissects reality, separating ideas into components, tracing cause and effect with precision, and refusing to accept a conclusion until every variable is accounted for. For the INFJ, truth arrives quietly and early. They sense when something is off before evidence appears, feel when a story doesn't align before facts contradict it, and recognize outcomes long before they unfold. This can look mysterious or even careless to observers, because the INFJ often cannot articulate the process in linear steps. The knowing is real, but it lives beneath language. INTPs, meanwhile, excel at explaining why something is true. They reconstruct reality piece by piece, ensuring nothing is assumed, nothing skipped, nothing taken on faith. Their conclusions come later, but when they arrive, they are defensible, elegant, and structurally sound. This contrast creates tension. INFJs may feel impatient when analysis lags behind what they already sense. NTPs may feel uneasy trusting a conclusion that hasn't been logically mapped. Yet both are seeing the same truth from opposite directions. INFJs approach it holistically, like recognizing a face instantly. NTPs approach it architecturally, like understanding how the face was built. One sees the forest in a flash, the other knows every tree. Neither approach is superior, but when truth needs to be felt quickly, INFJs arrive first. When truth needs to be proven, INTPs endure longer. Together, they reveal that truth is not only something you calculate, it is also something you recognize when all the pieces silently align. INFJs trust internal intuition shaped by emotional and symbolic data, whereas INTPs trust logical consistency and conceptual accuracy. INFJs move through the world guided by an inner compass, built from emotional signals, symbolic meaning, and patterns that form beneath conscious thought. Their intuition is not random or mystical. It is the result of thousands of micro-observations absorbed over time. Tone shifts, pauses, contradictions, emotional residue left in a room. All of it fuses into a quiet certainty that doesn't need external validation to feel true. INTPs, in contrast, place their trust in internal logic systems. For them, truth must cohere. Ideas must align without contradiction. Concepts must hold under pressure. If a conclusion breaks even one logical rule, it cannot stand, no matter how convincing it feels emotionally. For the INFJ, emotional data is information, not noise. Feelings are signals. Symbols carry weight. Subtext matters as much as content. When something feels wrong, it usually is, even if the evidence hasn't surfaced yet. This makes INFJs highly sensitive to meaning beyond words, but also vulnerable to being misunderstood, because intuition speaks in impressions, not equations. INTPs operate differently. They strip emotion away to see the framework underneath. They test ideas like code, running them through internal simulations, looking for flaws, inconsistencies, or hidden assumptions. Emotional resonance alone is never enough. If it cannot be explained, mapped, or justified, it remains untrusted. This difference shapes how each approaches decisions, conversations, and conflict. INFJs may arrive at the right conclusion early, but struggle to explain how they know. INTPs may arrive later, but when they do, they can show every step that led there. INFJs feel truth as alignment. INTPs recognize truth as precision. One listens inward, the other checks inward. One asks, does this resonate with the deeper pattern? The other asks, does this hold together without breaking? Neither approach is flawed. They are complementary. Intuition without structure can drift. Logic without intuition can miss what matters most. When INFJs and INTPs respect this difference, truth becomes not just accurate, but complete. INFJs sense future outcomes early, often before facts appear, while INTPs wait for enough variables to confirm a conclusion. INFJs experience the future as a quiet pressure building beneath the present. Long before events unfold, something inside them begins to align toward an outcome they can't yet prove. It's not prediction in the dramatic sense, it's pattern convergence. Emotional trajectories, behavioral habits, unspoken motives, and symbolic cues start pointing in the same direction, and the INFJ feels the destination before the road becomes visible. They don't need all the data to arrive, because their mind has already stitched together a living forecast from fragments most people overlook. By the time facts appear, the outcome often feels familiar, almost inevitable. INTPs move differently through time. They don't sense the future as a felt certainty, but as a hypothesis waiting to be tested. For them, foresight is built through accumulation. Each variable must be identified, isolated, and understood before it earns a place in the conclusion. They resist premature certainty because they know how often intuition can be biased or incomplete. Where the INFJ feels the arc of where things are heading, the INTP maps the mechanics of how they might get there. One trusts convergence, the other trusts verification. This difference creates tension in real life. INFJs may withdraw, prepare, or change course early, unable to fully explain why, but certain that something is coming. INTPs may appear hesitant or slow, not because they don't see the possibility, but because the equation isn't finished yet. The INFJ asks, where is this leading? The INTP asks, What evidence confirms this direction? Both are oriented toward truth, but they approach it from opposite ends of time. What makes INFJs uncanny is that their early sense of outcome often proves correct, even when dismissed at first. What makes INTPs formidable is that when they finally commit to a conclusion, it's structurally sound and hard to dismantle. INFJs live closer to emergence, where the future whispers before it speaks. INTPs live closer to certainty, where nothing is accepted until it can stand on its own. Together, they reveal a deeper truth. Foresight isn't just about seeing ahead, it's about knowing when to trust what you sense and when to wait for what you can prove. INFJs read meaning behind words and silence, while INTPs focus on the structure and logic of what is actually said. INFJs don't begin by listening to words. They listen to what surrounds them. The pauses between sentences, the hesitation before a response, the subtle change in tone when a topic shifts, all of it carries information. To an INFJ, silence is never empty. It's charged. It signals fear, restraint, avoidance, or truth waiting for safety. Meaning forms not from what is stated clearly, but from what is being protected, hidden, or unconsciously revealed. By the time a conversation ends, the INFJ often understands more about the speaker's inner state than the speaker intended to share. INTPs, by contrast, engage the spoken message as a system. Words are inputs. Sentences are structures. Arguments are frameworks to be tested for coherence and internal consistency. Silence, unless explicitly defined, is neutral, not meaningful until proven otherwise. Where an INFJ hears implication, an INTP hears absence. Their attention goes to definitions, assumptions, and whether each statement logically follows from the last. They aren't ignoring emotional subtext, they simply don't prioritize it as reliable data without confirmation. This creates a subtle disconnect. INFJs may feel something is wrong long before it's articulated, sensing misalignment between words and inner truth. INTPs may feel nothing is wrong at all because the logic checks out and no contradiction has been stated. The INFJ says, "Something feels off." The INTP asks, "Where exactly is the inconsistency?" Both are responding accurately, just to different layers of reality. In conflict, this difference becomes even clearer. INFJs track shifts in emotional energy and unspoken intent, adjusting their response to what they feel unfolding beneath the surface. INTPs track claims, premises, and conclusions, adjusting only when a flaw appears in the reasoning. INFJs may disengage early because the silence already told them what words haven't. INTPs may stay engaged longer, waiting for something concrete to address. Neither approach is superior, they reveal different truths. INFJs access meaning that lives between language, where human experience often hides. INTPs protect clarity by grounding conversation in what can be articulated and tested. One reads the atmosphere of the room, the other reads the blueprint of the argument. When combined, they offer a rare completeness, the emotional truth behind the message and the logical truth within it. INFJs arrive at insight quickly but struggle to explain how they know, while INTPs arrive later but can explain every step. The INFJ's knowing doesn't arrive like a thought. It arrives like a quiet click, a sudden internal alignment where scattered signals lock into place all at once. There is no visible process, no conscious checklist, no linear trail to retrace. One moment there is uncertainty, the next there is clarity, complete, embodied, and difficult to dismantle. This insight feels less like a conclusion and more like recognition, as if the truth was already present and simply stepped forward. Fast, clean, certain. And when asked how they know, the INFJ pauses, not because they are unsure, but because the path to the answer didn't use language in the first place. INTPs, on the other hand, move through insight like engineers assembling a machine. Each piece must be tested, named, connected. Their arrival is slower, but deliberate. They map the terrain step by step, checking internal consistency, eliminating contradictions, refining definitions. Where the INFJ experiences a sudden internal yes, the INTP experiences a gradual tightening of logic until only one conclusion remains standing. Slower. Methodical. Transparent. And when asked how they know, they can walk you through the entire structure, from the first assumption to the final result, without skipping a beat. This difference often creates misunderstanding. INFJs may be right early, but sound vague, intuitive, even unreliable to those who demand proof. INTPs may be late, but sound authoritative, precise, and intellectually convincing. The INFJ feels the outcome before the evidence fully appears. The INTP waits for the evidence before trusting the outcome. One knows without a map. The other builds the map before moving. In high-stakes situations, this contrast becomes striking. INFJs may disengage or redirect long before anyone else sees the problem forming, unable to fully justify their move, but deeply confident in it. INTPs may stay longer, refining their understanding until the pattern is undeniable and defensible. The INFJ's challenge is translation, turning felt certainty into words. The INTP's challenge is timing, reaching certainty before the moment passes. Together, they represent two forms of intelligence, one that senses truth as a whole and one that earns truth piece by piece. Fast intuition versus explainable precision. Different paths, same destination. INFJs prioritize human impact and emotional truth, whereas INTPs prioritize objective correctness and internal coherence. For the INFJ, truth is never abstract. It lives in people, consequences, and unseen emotional ripples that spread long after a decision is made. When they evaluate an idea, they instinctively ask what it will do to someone's inner world, how it will reshape trust, identity, or quiet hope. Accuracy matters, but only insofar as it serves meaning. An answer that is technically correct but emotionally destructive feels incomplete, even dangerous. The INFJ senses that human systems don't break because of flawed logic alone, but because emotional realities were ignored. Their intelligence leans toward healing, alignment, and long-term psychological impact rather than flawless structure. INTPs approach truth from a different axis entirely. For them, correctness must stand on its own, independent of emotional response. An idea is valuable if it is internally consistent, logically sound, and free of contradiction. Feelings are not dismissed, but they are secondary variables, not primary drivers. Where an INFJ feels the weight of how something lands, an INTP examines whether it holds up under scrutiny. If the logic is clean, the conclusion earns respect, even if it feels uncomfortable. Emotional reactions are data points, not deciding factors. What matters most is whether the system makes sense when stripped down to its core mechanics. This difference often creates friction, especially in conversations about ethics, decisions, or change. INFJs may adjust or soften truth to protect human dignity, sensing that timing and delivery shape reality as much as facts do. INTPs may deliver truth bluntly, believing clarity is the highest form of respect. The INFJ is guided by the question, what will this do to people? The INTP is guided by, is this actually true? One seeks resonance, the other precision. Neither approach is superior. They solve different problems. INFJs prevent damage that logic alone can't foresee. INTPs prevent collapse caused by emotional distortion and flawed reasoning. One safeguards the human soul of an idea, The other safeguards its structural integrity. When combined, they create truth that is both accurate and humane. When separated, they often misunderstand each other's priorities, mistaking care for bias or logic for coldness. INFJs see truth as something felt and lived, while INTPs see truth as something tested and proven. For the INFJ, truth arrives like a quiet recognition rather than a conclusion. It settles into the body before it ever forms into language, showing up as a sense of alignment or disturbance that cannot be ignored. They experience truth through lived resonance, through how something changes the emotional climate of a room, a relationship, or their own inner landscape. When something is true, it feels stable, grounded, and inevitable, as if it has always been there, waiting to be acknowledged. The INFJ does not separate truth from experience. If an idea cannot survive real human life, real pain, real consequences, then it remains incomplete. Truth must be walkable, breathable, and survivable in the world of people. INTPs, by contrast, approach truth as a structure to be stress-tested. It does not matter how an idea feels at first. What matters is whether it holds up when challenged, dissected, and rebuilt from the ground up. They pull concepts apart, searching for contradictions, weak assumptions, or hidden gaps. If an idea survives this process, it earns the title of truth, regardless of emotional comfort. For the INTP, truth exists independently of personal experience. It is something external, objective, and discoverable through rigorous thinking rather than internal sensing. Emotional resonance may follow later, but it is never the proof. This difference shapes how both types move through the world. INFJs often trust insights they cannot yet explain because those insights are validated by internal coherence and emotional reality. They watch how patterns unfold over time, how people behave when no one is watching, how consequences ripple outward. INTPs hesitate until evidence accumulates, until variables are accounted for, and logic closes the loop. They would rather arrive late with certainty than early with intuition. To an INFJ, this can look like hesitation. To an INTP, the INFJ's certainty can look premature, yet both are responding to different definitions of truth. INFJs guard truth as a lived experience that shapes identity and meaning. INTPs guard truth as a tested system that resists collapse. One protects the soul of truth, the other protects its skeleton. When they misunderstand each other, conflict emerges. When they respect the difference, something rare happens. Truth becomes both deeply human and intellectually unbreakable. Truth doesn't belong to one mind or one method. It reveals itself differently depending on how you're built to see it. Some of you recognize truth the moment it enters the room. Others need to take it apart, challenge it, and rebuild it before trusting it. Neither path is weaker. Both are necessary. But if you've ever felt like you know something long before you can explain it, or if you've ever needed to test every idea before believing it, this difference may finally make sense. If this resonated, pause for a moment and notice which side you lean toward when searching for truth. Then tell me in the comments, do you feel truth first, or do you prove it first? And if you stayed until the end, type the word clarity in the comments so I know you saw the full picture.